Thank you everyone for joining us this session. It's all about Mapbox Address Autofill. Before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping items. First, all build sessions are recorded, so you should be able to watch all of the sessions. And the second, captions are available in multiple languages if you need. Get question? Yes, please submit your questions through the Zoom Q&A features so our speakers will be able to see it. Lastly, if you want to explore more, we have one keynote later today. Feel free to explore other sessions in the Zoom lobby. All right, that's all for my logistic. Let's get into the good stuff. We are very excited to have three of our team members. Robert Florance, product manager for geocoding. We also have Mark, software engineer for search. And we also have our friend Emily joining us for a live demo. She's from developer relation team. All right, without further ado, let me hand this over to Robert to kick things off. Thank you, Robert.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We want to get to the live demo soon. So I just want to provide a little bit of context before we get to it. So I'm going to talk about where the address autofill sits within our search portfolio, just basically what it is, and then we'll jump into Emily and Mark giving some demos. Address autofill is one part of our search platform. So Geocoding API is an API that is designed to translate addresses and places into latitudes and longitudes, and the reverse. Address autofill is basically very similar to the geocoding API, but we wrap up the geocoding API into a convenient SDK that autofills form fields. It also allows storage of results, makes things a lot more convenient, which you'll see very quickly here. Searchbox API is like geocoding API, but it also includes points of interest. So restaurants, brands, parks, etc. You'd be able to find the Searchbox API. And finally, we have something called boundaries data, which is a very high precision set of different administrative polygons around the entire world so that you can analyze your data. So address autofill, which is what we're talking about today, this is, again, we've packaged up this geocoding API into a convenient to use front-end SDK. It will suggest a complete address in real time, just auto-completes what your user is typing in, and then it will automatically pull in the correct elements of that address into the different form fields. It'll have standardization of that address as it goes in there. And it also, as you can see on the screen right now, there's a little map there that shows where the result is that we've got for the user to give them confidence that we found the right location for them. And a couple of our larger customers who use Address Autofill, Planet Fitness uses Address Autofill as part of any time a user is signing up for their product. This helps them not only capture like billing information, but also it helps them make sure it's a real correct address so that they can select the best, most closest Planet Fitness to this user. And then on the right side, you see this is a customer of ours that they help contractors register projects so that they can handle scheduling, quotes, customer communication through their platform. And so whenever a project is added, it goes through the address autofill product, not just to make it easier for the entry, but also to make sure that this is a known address that is relevant to the project. And finally, we have a lot of different resources for learning how to implement address autofill. It's a very easy product to implement. We have tutorials and examples on our website, but I think a lot better than any of this, if you're here right now, is to check out exactly how it's going to be done in a live coding demo. So I'm going to pass it over to Mark.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. Thanks, Bing. Let me go ahead and grab screen sharing. All right, so I'm going to be focusing on a quick demo to show you how you can incorporate address autofill into a web application. And we'll be using our Search.js web SDK for that. So quickly, let's take a look at the end state that we're going to be building up to today so you can see what these features are. So as you can see, we have a simple web form here, and I'll start typing an address into this first form field. And you can see that our SDK is going to return a dropdown of suggested addresses. And when I click on or make a selection, we're going to automatically pull out the individual address components and put them into their respective form fields. At the same time, we're also going to be visualizing and rendering that address on this minimap component. And this minimap component gives end users the ability to visually confirm and visualize where that address is located. And we also have a feature that lets them adjust the pin location associated with that address and allows us to capture that saved coordinate back in case we wanted to pass that through our application for some downstream use case. And finally, if I were to add some manual overrides to my form inputs, you can also intercept the form submission to allow the end user to confirm if the address that they've entered is correct by providing a corrected or suggested response from the Mapbox Autofill API. And when I do select that suggestion, it corrects my form field and passes the corrected values through my form submission. So that's what we're going to be building up to in this web demo. A couple things I just wanted to point out about the Autofill SDK that could be really useful. We do manage all of the session token and session state for you. Autofill is a product that it uses a session-based credit system. And so anytime that you're typing into this autocomplete field, each keystroke is a suggest API call. Each selection is a retrieve event call. We're bundling all that for you together into a single session. And the added benefit on top of that with our SDK is that if you do use our minimap or confirmation modal components, all of those API calls also get bundled into the same session. So it's a really great and efficient way to bundle together our Mapbox services. So with that said, I'm going to start diving into the code here. And I'll start by resetting our application to its original state. So as you can see, we're just starting out with an empty form field with no added functionality yet built into it. And let's take a look at what we're starting from in the code. I'm just going to be working in a single HTML file for the sake of simplicity. If you're using a project that has a module bundler, something like React or some other JavaScript library, we do offer components in our Search.js SDK for those use cases. But since we're just going to be limiting this to a single HTML file, we're actually going to be bringing in our SDK through a script tag. So let's start out by importing that code to bring in our library. The first thing we want to do is add a script tag up at the top of our file. And that script tag should have a defer attribute just so that we make sure that we're not going to block any other page loading with our script. And then we have a reference to the API mapbox.com domain where you can find our CDN version of the Search.js package. And again, if you're using a module bundler, you do the same thing through an npm install process. So now we've imported this script tag here. And just to give you a little bit more context of what this file looks like, we have a little style block here. We have a body, which has our HTML components like our form. Inside that form, we have a number of input elements that correspond to each address component. And then at the bottom, we have a script block. And right now in the script block, we just have some code running after the window has finished loading. And here we're processing like the form submission handler. Now that we've imported our Search.js library through this script tag, when we come down into our load callback, the script will have been initialized. And when it does that, it's going to inject some namespace variables and objects into our runtime environment. And the first one that you want to know about is called Mapbox Search. And this Mapbox Search is essentially a namespace that gives you an entry point to start calling different functions or components or properties associated with our Search.js SDK. The one that we're interested in first is this autofill function. So I'm taking this Mapbox Search namespace, calling the autofill function, and at a minimum, you need to pass in this access token from your Mapbox account in order to authenticate. Now, when we call this autofill function, what the code is actually going to do is look through your HTML body for a form, and that form needs to have an input. And there's only one other step that you need to add in here, which is this input needs to have an autocomplete attribute on it. And the autocomplete attribute that it needs to, or the value for that needs to be either address line 1 or street address. Either of those values will allow our autofill SDK to recognize that this input is the one that you want to be registered for that type ahead autocomplete behavior. So I'm going to use address line 1, and let's save our project and come back to our form and see if we can start seeing results here. And now when I type in some keystrokes, you can see we're now getting results back from the autofill API. Now, when I make a selection, we're not yet pushing in any information to these other form fields. And that's because we need to add similar autocomplete attributes to each of the other form fields that correspond to those address components. And if you're wondering where you can find out what values those need to be, we do have a helpful page and one of our tutorials that you can find off of the Search.js documentation page, where we have a table that shows you the autocomplete attribute value that is associated with each component of an address. So the kind of first line that you would see in an address is what we just added, which is address line 1. And then if you have like a address line 2 for an apartment or a unit, you would add that in here. The city component, it corresponds to address level 2. So we'll add this one. State corresponds to address level 1. Zip code corresponds to postcode. And then country, you have a couple options. You can either choose country or country name. Country is just a 2-letter abbreviation. I'll go ahead and choose country name. And if you're wondering where we came up with these labels or these values, it's not random. We actually follow the WHATWG web specification, which is a commonly used or universal series of web standards used around the web development community. So if your application is already following those standards, you might have already added these autocomplete attributes to your form. So now that we've added these attributes to each of these form fields, let's save our file again and come back to our page and start typing in an address. Let's select an address. And now you can see we are pushing in each of those individual address values into their respective form fields. So with just that one line of code in our JavaScript and adding some autocomplete attributes to our inputs, we're already getting the core functionality of address autofill onto our form. So the next thing that we wanted to show is the mini-map window, which lets you visualize that address location. So in order to do that, let's first start by carving out a little bit of space within our HTML to act as a placeholder for where that mini-map will be rendered. So I'll add a div between our input fields and our submit button. And I'm also going to add some CSS styling so that we can visualize kind of what this placeholder looks like. So up here in my style block, I'll add a new definition for our mini-map container div, which will just be a simple square with a background color. So now that we have this placeholder in place, we can start adding our mini-map functionality in our script section. So I'm going to use another class name that has been injected into our runtime environment when we loaded our script tag. And that class name is called Mapbox Address Minimap. And we'll create a new instance of that and set it equal to this variable. And then simply all you need to do is take our container element that we created up here and append our minimap instance to that container. And I'll save my file. Now, right now, this actually won't create any visual effect in your application, And that's because the mini map will not become visible until you've passed a feature into it. And that feature is essentially a GeoJSON feature from one of our API responses that contains latitude and longitude coordinate information. And until you pass that information into the mini map, it will remain hidden. So in order for us to find the feature that we want to pass into the mini map, we want to take the response that we get from when we make a selection in our form. So when I type in an address and I click on one of these suggestions, I want to take that feature that we've selected and pass that in as a data object to our mini map. So in order for us to do that, the first thing I want to do is I need to set our return value from the autofill function to a variable so that we can reuse this autofill object. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to listen for a specific event that is triggered on this autofill object. So down here, after we've initialized our mini map, I'm going to add an event listener on this autofill object. And specifically, we're going to listen for the retrieve event. And the retrieve event, again, it gets triggered anytime you click on or make a selection of one of the suggested auto completions. And then within this callback, we're going to accept the payload that it sends, which is a GeoJSON response. And we're simply going to set the feature property on the minimap equal to the first feature in that response object. So let's save our application. Let's come back to our app and make a selection. And you can see that something is happening here. We're getting a pin and we're getting a Mapbox logo, and it looks like a missing image icon. And that's because the last thing that we need to do is authenticate our usage of the minimap, which under the hood is using our static maps API. So I could, in my minimap definition, do something like minimap.access token equals and copy in my access token. But that's a little bit redundant because we've already set that value up here for the autofill function. And it seems like we shouldn't have to set it in multiple places. And in fact, with our SDK, we do offer the ability to use a global configuration state of the library to set an access token in one place. And so what that looks like will be, we'll take our Mapbox search namespace and we'll call the config access token property and set our access token onto that. And so this access token then will be able to be used by any subsequent components that you're using from the library. So the autofill component, the minimap component, later when we do the confirmation modal, those will all be referencing this shared configuration. And now that I've set that here, I can actually remove the access token that's passed into my autofill options argument. So now let's save again, come back to our application and try another address selection. And now when I do select an address, we push that feature onto the minimap and we're getting it rendered here from this static map API call. And by default, this is not an interactive map, it's static. But now we'll take a look at how you can add in some of those interactivity features. There are a number of options that you can check out within our documentation. The ones that I want to highlight today are called satellite toggle and can adjust marker. Satellite toggle simply gives you this the kind of ability to switch back and forth between a vector map and a satellite map. And just so that you know, you are able to pass in a custom Mapbox map style definition in case you created one in Mapbox Studio. So you can change the styling that way. And then this can adjust marker property gives you this adjust pin button. And when you click on this adjust pin button, it gives you the opportunity to start padding on the map and also to pick up and drag the location of the pin and then to save it. And when you save it, we now have an opportunity to grab that new coordinate of the new pin location. In order for us to actually pull out and extract that location, we need to set one other property, which is this onSave marker location callback. And this function gets called whenever the user does click save when they're adjusting their pin. And it passes in the longitude and latitude coordinate of that pin location. And here we'll just log it to our console so we can see that we have access to that data now. But you can imagine that you might be able to do something with this downstream in your application. For example, it could be really useful if you wanted to pass that to a delivery driver company or a logistics company or something else that might offer additional precision or information when making a delivery. So let's save this and let's just see that we're getting that information in our console. So I'll make a selection of my address. We'll adjust the pin a little bit and click save. And now you can see in our console here, we're getting that coordinate back. So the last part that I wanted to show here was that confirmation modal. So what the confirmation modal is the opportunity to basically check that the values that the user has entered into the form have been validated against the data that we have within our Mapbox Address Autofill API. And it's really simple to bring in this functionality. It's a one-line addition. And I'm going to add this confirmation modal step inside our form submit callback because I want this to not interrupt earlier in the flow. So after we prevented the default behavior, I'm going to add a line of code in which we're waiting for this Mapbox Search .confirm address function to return. This function simply takes in your form element as an argument, and we need to make our callback asynchronous. And let me click save and demonstrate this. So let's add in an address here, and I'm actually going to start just typing manually. I'm not going to make any selections from our dropdown here. I'll just type in all these form fields by hand. And the purpose here is to show that I might be making some typos. I might be misremembering certain address components or values. So there might be some fallacies in this address. Now, when I click submit, we're going to validate that the text that I've submitted within my input to see if it matches against any addresses within the Mapbox Address Autofill API. And here we're going to present back our best estimate or suggestion for what the user probably meant. So in this case, I'll say, okay, yeah, I did mean this one. I had just had the wrong zip code. So when I click yes, we're going to update and correct all those form fields with our accepted confirmed value. We'll update the mini-map since we have one in our application. And we're also passing in those corrected values into the rest of our form fields here. And there are a number of other configuration options that you can take into account when you are working with this SDK. You can adjust the sensitivity of this confirmation modal to look for certain criteria within our response to determine if the address that we return is a high enough accuracy, or if the match codes against what the user submitted have a high enough match. And then also for other components that we've looked at, like our mini-map or even the autofill function itself, there are a lot of ways that you can configure and customize this to be more specific to your needs and your application. So I do encourage you all to check out our Search.js documentation page to see what all those options are. You can configure its interaction with our foundational API parameters. You can change the styling and the look and feel of this UI so that I can meet the needs of your integration. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of what features are available with this web SDK and how quick and simple it can be to integrate that into your checkout form. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'll turn things over to Emily to talk about mobile.
Thanks so much, Mark. So yeah, like Mark said, I'm gonna give you guys a brief overview of this from the iOS perspective. It's gonna be a more simplistic application, but just to show you some cross compatibility that we have. Let me share my screen. Let's do that. All right. So As you can see my Xcode here, I'm going to walk you guys through the code first just to show you how everything is built out, and then I'll do a live demo at the end. So starting off at the top, you can see we have a bunch of different declarations. We're storing the form state variables here of like the address, the city, the state, the zip code. Um, and if we scroll down here, we're grabbing the declaration of the address autofill itself so we can get access to the SDK and its features, as well as an array to store our suggestions that will clear out once we've selected an option. We're also going to add a tag to allow, like, once you've made a selection, to prevent the user from typing until they click back into the input field to type again. So just some, good user feedback stuff. If we go into the body, we have a bunch of Z and V stacks to help orient our UI. You can see at the top we have some just a statement of like address information, and then we have a V stack here that kind of spreads out some of the input fields, allowing you to enter the street address. And again, there's that is user typing just to double check like, am I actually putting an input here? Should I be trying to do a search? And if not, don't actually activate the search. Scrolling down to the bottom here, again, it's very similar functionality for like the apartment number, the city, the state, the zip code, and then adding a spacer at the end just to make sure it's spaced evenly throughout your application. Um, and yeah. Oh, if we look down here, this is checking if we're showing suggestions or not. And so we'll go through and actually print out the suggestions once a search query is made. And then if we scroll down a little further, we have our debounced search function, which is going to clear suggestions once you actually select something. And then obviously create a new search again if you're typing back into that input field. And then down at the bottom here, we have the actual perform search function. So this is going to go through and as you're typing things, actually start querying the information to show you your suggestions on screen. But yeah, we have a queue down here to handle that. And then lastly, we have our select suggestion functionality. So once you actually go in and click on one of the items in that suggestion array, it will go through and allow you to grab that information. And then the nice thing, similar to how like Mark was saying, like once the information is selected, we'll go in and autofill the rest of the input fields in your application. Because if, say, for instance, you only got through typing the first half of the street address and the option you want appears, it'll go in and refill the rest of those input fields for you. But all right, so without further ado, let's go over and check out the actual application itself. So I have a couple of different addresses that I'm going to input, and then just to show you like the accuracy of the application, I have what the address is supposed to be on the left side here, and I'll start typing it out, and you'll see them pop up as I'm typing. So the first place is a really cool cafe in New York, called Cafe Kitsune. They have this really cool like black sesame coffee, which is really nice. But so if I start typing Brooklyn, it appears right here. And then so as you can see, if I click here, it'll autofill the rest of the information. So again, saves your customers a lot of time because they can get through halfway typing application or typing an address as opposed to having to type everything out themselves. Another address I'll show you guys is Zorro's Family Bakery, which is located in Grand Central Station. Um, Went there on a girls' trip, which was fun. But if I start typing here, and actually, there you go, it's already coming up here. Again, autofills the rest of the information out. You can see that the zip code changed. And then to give you guys a different location that's outside of New York, there's a coffee shop in Dedham, Massachusetts that I've been to, which is really nice. And if I start typing Legacy Place here, Legacy PL, this should pop up like that. And there you go. So, oh, sorry, one second. Legacy Place. So again, changes all the information and refills. So it's just, again, really convenient for customers, to allow them to have this information autofill for you. But yeah, so that is a quick overview of the iOS application.
All right, thank you, Emily. Thank you, Mark and Robert. We have some time. Let's do some Q&A. I thought we have a question in the Q&A session. All right. From BS, is there any attribute to get country name such as Cook County?
That's a good question. I was just checking the what wig specification. I don't see that there is a specific attribute that's predefined for counties or what we call district level here at Mapbox. But we do have that information that comes back in our autofill suggestion response in the context object. So you could wire together your own custom callback that pulls that information out of the context and puts it onto a district. Or a county label.
Thanks, Mark. All right, another question. What is the difference between geocoding APIs and address autofill?
Take this one. So the data, like the addresses and data that's inside of the product and the fundamental behavior of the search engine are the same across geocoding and address autofill. But address autofill, just for depending on the use case, is a lot easier to use. And the main reason is that typically with address autofill, you want to save a result in your database permanently. You don't want to have, re-geocode it every time that you want to use that address, recapture the address every time. And so with geocoding, what you could do is you could make all permanent geocoding calls because you're allowed to store those. But that means every time the user was typing, every keystroke that you sent a request to get suggestions, you'd be paying for permanent geocoding calls. So address autofill just makes it a lot more predictable and ultimately cheaper because as your user is typing in address autofill, you're not being charged for how much they type. You're only charged for when they actually make the selection, and then you have the rights to save the information contained in that response in your database indefinitely. So, anyways, they're the same data, and the auto completion behavior will work very similarly. Whereas address autofill, it's specifically about addresses, and it allows you to store the results.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert. There's another question from the audience. We have limited developer resource. So how difficult it's gonna be, we're gonna switch from our current provider to Mapbox Autofill.
I mean, for what you're looking at in the demos that Mark and Emily did, I mean, these are things that take a team, a couple days, half a sprint, depending on the complexity of the integration. But if you've just got like, hey, there's this page on our site, we need to be able to capture addresses in here. What we've seen is customers are done with this extremely quickly. It's not a very heavy lift to get address autofill into your website. So easy.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Let me see. Another question. Is it possible to include our own POI data or address, like stores or pickup points, in address autofill result?
In the address autofill results, there currently is not a way to add your own data. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that we do want, because this isn't really meant to be for like a delivery or a billing, checkout situation. We want to make sure that we're returning really high quality and deliverable address information. So we do want to, limit it to well-known addresses. However, if you are interested in supplementing the results that you get back from address search with some of your own data. We do offer in our SDK for the search box and geocoding components, there's a custom option that you can set called custom search, in which you essentially are able to simultaneously search against your own database, whether that's local or external, and then supplement those results on top of the Mapbox results and present them both within that drop-down UI component. So if that's something that you're interested in, I'd suggest taking a look at those components.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. All right, I think we're just at the time. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thanks to all the speakers. Thank you for your demos. This session is recorded, so you should be able to watch later. Thank you everyone for joining us. Enjoying the rest of the build. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.